The year was 1779. It's been said on an early December day, an Apache force made up of over 300 men approached the not yet completed Spanish fort of San Agustin del Tucson. With the intent to plunder livestock, the Apaches engaged in battle with Capitan Pedro Alandre y Saavedra and his 15 soldiers stationed at the Presidio. Unprepared and vastly outnumbered, the Spanish miraculously survived the confrontation known today as the First Battle of Tucson. The number of Apache casualties are unknown, but it's been reported that Alandre killed the tribal chief and brought back his severed head to the Presidio on his lance as a trophy. This bloody and barbaric war would continue in the years to come. Today, on the grounds where Fort Tucson once stood, just below the street signs, you will see markers that read the Presidio District. Historical homes of early Tucsonans, restaurants, bars, and museums can be found there. It's hard to imagine, at one point in time, this pleasant downtown neighborhood was once a place steeped in death and violence. But the past, especially a disturbing one, always finds a way to reveal itself. During a recent tour of the Presidio San Agustin Museum, volunteer coordinator Kate Avalos spoke of a visitor's ghostly encounter with a figure from days gone by.
Another person I have heard at some point, I think it was also in this part of the house, had commented to one of our docents that they really liked I think it was an Apache reenactor.
Oh.
That was in here, but we've never had one.
We've never had an Apache reenactor.
No, we've never had any Native people's reenactors, and some lady that was here thought that was a really cool reenactor.
I bet it would have been.
Was he walking around in the
been.
house?
I guess he was walking around in here, wasn't it? Jennifer, have you heard that story?
Just that you told me.
Yeah, I think he was over in here. Because I think he even at first thought that she meant the scout that we have right there. Mm-hmm. But she was talking about someone that was like here in the doorway that was walking around, not the mannequin back there.
On this, the anniversary of the establishment of the Presidio San Agustin del Tucson, I will be diving into the haunts and history of this downtown location. Welcome to Episode 4 of El Presidio Project.
Uncovering the creepy side of the old Pueblo. This is El Presidio Project. Strange Tales of Tucson.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining me for another episode of this podcast, which is now going on its third month. Pretty crazy. It feels like I just started doing this. And, it probably sounds like it too, but, I'm still kind of learning the ropes here, and hopefully you'll stick with me as I navigate through the process. So, the fall season is approaching, and I have some really cool stuff planned out for next month and for October's Halloween episode. Pretty excited about that one, actually. Just yesterday, my friend and I went to the place where I'll be doing my second lockdown investigation and spoke with a couple of really nice guys who agreed to grant me an interview about their experiences. So things like that really encourage me to push forward and put together something hopefully you will all enjoy. There's a lot to cover in today's episode, so I'm just going to go ahead and get things going with Episode 4, San Agustin del Tucson. "242 years ago, while colonists in the East were engaged in a war with British forces in places like Massachusetts and New York, here in the southwest land of Sonora, a different battle was being fought. While some native tribes were peaceful, there were others who resented the Europeans' presence on their land and would frequently launch attacks. In order to protect themselves, their settlements, and missions, the Spanish colonists began to build forts, or presidios. El Presidio San Ignacio de Tubac once stood about 50 miles south of present-day Tucson. In the summer of 1775, New Spain's recently commissioned officer of defenses Hugo O'Connor came to evaluate Fort Tubac. Somewhat displeased with what he saw, the man known as the Red Captain headed north to the San Javier mission to seek guidance. There he met with a priest named Francisco Garces. Garces led the visiting officer and his men to a place that could potentially serve as the site of a new Presidio. O'Connor believed the land the local Pimas called Tucson had the essentials he was looking for. On August 20th, 1775, with the approval of Padre Francisco Garces and Lieutenant Juan Fernandez Carmona, Hugo O'Connor established the Spanish fort that he would come to name San Agustin del Tucson. In the years that followed, intense battles between the Spanish army and the Apaches would take place. 3 years after the first battle, which I spoke of earlier, some 600 Apaches, both on foot and on horses, attempted to capture the fort on a quiet Sunday morning. It was a surprise attack that would result in the deaths of 10 individuals: 8 Apaches, 1 Spanish soldier, and 1 female civilian. 7 months later, on Christmas Day, the Apache force returned and tried to seize herds of cattle. Once again, they were defeated by the Spanish soldiers. 6 Apaches were killed during the battle and beheaded. Their heads were displayed on the wall of the Presidio. Spanish troops would remain in the Tucson fort for another 64 years. In 1846, during the Mexican-American War, Mexican troops took control of the Presidio. A decade later, San Agustin del Tucson was taken over by the United States. Following the Civil War Battle of Picacho Pass, Union soldiers captured Confederate Tucson on May 20, 1862, without firing a single shot. A year later, Union Arizona Territory was born, and Tucson became its capital. As time went on, the need for San Agustin became unnecessary. Peace had finally come to the old pueblo, and by 1918, the last remaining wall of the Presidio was torn down. An excavation of the fort was completed in early 2006. The excavation uncovered a 2,000-year-old Native American pit house and the foundation of the original Presidio wall. A reconstruction of San Agustin del Tucson was built around the excavation site and functions today as a museum. The following clip you're about to hear is my discussion with Kate Avalos and docent Dini Broom about the paranormal activity that has occurred there.
I'm Kate Avalos, the volunteer coordinator and interpretive activities manager.
And I'm Jeannie Broom. I'm one of the docents that she's managing, which is good. It helps me.
So, some of the stories I've heard is actually where you're standing is one of them.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. One of our docents had told me before that a lady was standing here right by this, which is actually just a little crawl space, and that she suddenly screamed because she said something was grabbing her ankle. As you back up even more.
Yeah, as I back up here.
So
I'm afraid I don't get scared yet.
yeah, well, that's just some odd thing that just something was like grabbing or scratching at her ankle when she was standing here. Of course, there was nothing here. I also just recently, the former city superintendent used to have an office in here, and he was telling me that he used to see shadows go across this room all the time for no apparent reason. And then we have a lot of problems with our alarm. And he was like one of the first ones where he said he got a call at about 2 in the morning. This was back when the place first opened, so this was probably like 2008, maybe 2009. And he got a call from someone telling him that 2 men had broken into the Presidio. And at that time, we had cameras out on the grounds outside as well. So he came down here, and there was no one here at all, and everything was locked up. He didn't see anyone. He was waiting for the police to come, but they weren't coming, so he contacted them, the downtown police, to say he'd gotten a call that someone had broken into the Presidio. They came down here, with a dog even, and they wandered around the grounds, and they're like, there is no one here. There's been nobody in here. They did not call him. The alarm company did not call him.
Oh my goodness.
And then, since like I said, at the time there were still cameras outside, he watched the cameras, and there was no one ever on the cameras, so it was just an odd,
That's weird.
unexplained. And I was actually covering for Jennifer, who is our gift shop manager, last summer. It was Sunday around 9 in the morning. I was coming in to open up, and when I was right outside that door, I heard a huge crash come from this exhibit room. So at first I thought Rick was here. He is the vice president of the board, and he does a lot of our exhibits. So I thought Rick was here doing an exhibit or something like that. So I walked in, but then the alarm went off like normal, and this door was locked still. So I turned the alarm off, and then I'm like creeping up to this door, like with my panic button ready, thinking someone must have broken in. And when I opened the door, there was no one in there. Nothing had fallen. There was no.
Nothing,
But you heard it like a crash.
It was a loud. Actually, I heard 2 loud crashes from that room, and I thought maybe a painting had fallen or something had fallen off the wall. But there was nothing. The room was completely fine. Nothing had fallen. There was nobody in the room. We have lawyers next door, but it was 9 in the morning on a Sunday, so I doubt it was coming from them.
Right.
That same week, we also had the bathroom doors were locked. The alarm went off about 3 different nights, saying the men's bathroom door was being opened, and every time I'd come to work, the doors were still locked, and there was no apparent reason. The alarm company even finally came out, and
Let's spend the night.
they came out and actually reinforced the doors and tightened them because they thought that might be what was going on. And then just recently, actually, just a couple weeks ago, I came in and the alarm was off because it said the men's bathroom had been opened again. It wasn't. I went and checked it. It was locked, so it was just kind of
Interesting.
yeah.
Fascinating.
Across the street from the location, just a few steps away from the door of the Presidio Museum's gift shop, stands the Tucson Artisans Building, a place made up of art gallery, shops, and La Cocina restaurant. It was here where I participated in my very first paranormal lockdown investigation with the Tucson Ghost Society. I'm making my way up to the patio right in front of the door of the pub. Hello, is there anybody up here? Can you come talk to me? According to Becky, the Tucson Ghost Society founder and lead paranormal investigator, there are a few spirits that roam around the shops and La Cocina's restaurant's courtyard. A cowboy, a little girl, and a soldier named Frank. During our first group EVP session, the REM pod, a tool used by paranormal investigators to detect energy disturbances, began to go off inside the Old Town Artisans building.
Little girl, are you here with us right now? Go ahead and start the recorder. Recording inside of La Cocina. I am setting the recorder down next to me. The REM pod is going off, and I am turning off my flashlight. Little girl, is that you? I got the name Sally, and I can remember the name Sally from before. Is that your name? Are you here, Sally? Is this the little girl? It's the little girl. Can you touch something besides the REM pod? Like twist one of the flashlights or touch Boo? Can you touch Boo? Is this the cowboy? Is it the cowboy? Who's here with us? Are you still here? Make that go off some more. Okay, thank you. But it would be helpful if you did something else too. Can you twist one of the flashlights or play with Boo? You can feel free to ask questions too.
Are you a male? Is that a yes?
Okay, can we do this? Tap it once for yes and twice for no. Do you understand that? Yes would be one tap. Can you do that? That's more than one and that's more than two. Can you tap once for yes?
We moved outdoors during our final EVP session. The REM pod placed near the steps of La Cocina's restaurant's kitchen door was silent. But something came through.
Can you draw energy from the lightning? Flashlight. If anyone wants to ask any questions, we got a couple minutes left.
Can you tell us your name?
Is that any of you that just talked? Did you guys even hear that?
There's a bird.
No, I heard a voice. You guys didn't hear that?
I heard it.
She said it's very quiet. Right, you said that. Alright. But it wasn't her.
I don't think so. It sounded like it was... And I know it wasn't anyone walking by. Are you trying to talk to us?
In my opinion, I hear the words Lieutenant Pike. Here it is again. What makes this incredibly weird is that I had just asked for a name. Furthermore, no one else heard the voice except for Becky. Had it been the voice of someone walking down the street, we would have all heard it. Immediately after hearing this EVP recording, I jumped online to find any mention of a Lieutenant Pike with a connection to the Presidio. The only thing I could find were websites and articles about American explorer Zebulon Pike, who was in fact a lieutenant at the time he and his men were captured by Spanish soldiers and taken through New Mexico, Texas, and Chihuahua. Of all the names that could have come through that night, why this one? I'll never know the answer to that. Before I began researching the history of this downtown location, I asked a history buff friend of mine, "Do you think the Presidio district is really haunted?" He replied, "How can it not be?" From an ancient Native American village to a fort that sheltered hundreds of Spanish, Mexican, and American soldiers over a span of a century, to its current form as a thriving section of downtown, where locals and tourists frequently gather to enjoy its many charms, the Presidio district remains to be an important part of the city of Tucson. Up next, the Weekend Creepshow Report. In today's segment, I will be giving a brief review of the incredibly awesome horror thriller, The Devil's Candy.
The good, the bad, and everything in between. It's the Weekend Creepshow Report.
I'm making a little adjustment for this part of the podcast. So from now on, I'll be focusing on one film or one television show at a time. This will give me a bit more room to really get into what I liked or didn't like, and to give you, the listener, more of a detailed review. The Devil's Candy was written and directed by Australian filmmaker Sean Byrne. It premiered about 2 years ago at the Toronto International Film Festival and was released by IFC Midnight in March of this year, and is available right now on Netflix. According to an interview, Byrne was inspired by the Nick Cave song Red Right Hand, and came up with the concept of the story told in The Devil's Candy. The film begins with the awesome Pruitt Taylor Vince as the incredibly disturbed and possessed villain Ray. Ray is trying to drown out the creepy voice he hears in his head by playing an electric guitar as loud as he can. You'll immediately recognize Vince if you're a fan of The Walking Dead. He played the doomed Otis in season 2. Anyway, so as he's playing his guitar, a woman, who we later find out is his mother, walks in on him and tells him he's making a racket and he needs to cut it out. He responds in a strange manner, and she eventually suggests that he might need to return to the hospital, which you get the impression that she means the mental hospital. With the voice still in his head, he lashes out. I'm purposely being a bit vague here so as to not give away any spoilers. The story then shifts focus and introduces the Hellman family, made up of metalhead artist Jesse, played by Ethan Embry, his wife Astrid, and their daughter Zoe. The Hellmans move into the home where Ray once lived, and eventually Jesse begins to hear the same creepy voice that Ray heard. This sort of puts him in a trance of some kind, and he begins to paint these really dark and frightening images, including one representing his daughter surrounded by flames and screaming. It really disturbs him because he can't remember painting it and feels like something is trying to tell him something, almost like a premonition he expresses through his art. Ray returns to his former home and begins to stalk the Hellmans. As soon as he does, the suspense gets crazy. Plus, we get to see what he does when he's not around the Hellman family. It's edge-of-your-seat, holy crap, heart-pounding suspense. There's no jump scares, just good old-fashioned, in-your-face terror. Hands down, probably one of my favorite horror films to come out this year. The plot is creepy, the actors are great, and the soundtrack contains metal tracks from Ghost, Slayer, Machine Head, and Metallica. Can't go wrong with metal and horror, in my opinion. Definitely take the time out of your night and check out The Devil's Candy. That about wraps it up for this episode of El Presidio Project. As always, thanks for listening, and I will be returning next month with another local ghost story and a road trip to one of the most haunted hotels in the United States. Take care all, and in light of recent events, remember to be kind to each other, Tucson. Peace.